Hi students, welcome to SATP Biology 1 tutorial section 2. In this section we will cover Strand 2, Physical Science, Competency 2, Biochemical Basis of Life, Part 1. Strand 2, Physical Science, Competency 2. Describe the biochemical basis of life and explain how energy flows within and between the living systems. I have included the PLDs, or your performance level descriptors, for Competency 2. These PLDs have been included for informational purposes only. Here you will find the vocabulary that will be used for Competency 2, Strand 2. You will see a list of assessment verbs on the left and scientific terms associated with the competency on the right. Before we get started with the lesson, download and complete the Foursquare vocabulary sheet for each assessment or scientific term that is unfamiliar to you prior to completing Competency 2 lesson. This lesson will ask you to compare and describe the types of bond formation. The student will explain how water is an essential component of a living system. The student will describe the pH scale and relate its significance to homeostasis in living organisms. The student will describe the structure and functions of macromolecules. The students will explain how enzymes regulate biochemical reactions. Let's look at the atom. The study of chemistry begins with the basic unit of matter, the atom. The atom is the smallest particle of a substance that still retains the properties of that substance. Atoms are composed of three smaller subatomic particles: protons, neutrons, and electrons. In the diagram, you will find the location of these subatomic particles in an atom. Protons and neutrons have about the same mass and are found in the nucleus. Electrons are in constant motion in the space surrounding the nucleus. Protons have a positive charge. Electrons have a negative charge. Neutrons carry no charge, as you see in the diagram. Again, you will see that the electrons are orbiting the nucleus. They have a negative charge. Your protons and your neutrons are located inside of the nucleus. Protons have a positive charge. Neutrons carry no charge. Most of the weight of the atom will come from the nucleus, where you will find your protons and neutrons. A chemical element is a pure substance that consists entirely of one type of atom. More than 100 elements are known, but only about 20 to 24 are commonly found in living organisms. Elements are represented by one or two letter symbols. For example, O stands for oxygen and Na stands for sodium, as you see in the periodic table below. A compound is a substance formed by the chemical combination of two or more elements in definite proportions. The composition of compounds are represented by a kind of shorthand known as a chemical formula. H2O, water, has two atoms of hydrogen and one atom of oxygen. The physical and chemical properties of a compound are very different from those of the elements from which it is formed. As you can see below, sodium and chlorine, two different elements combine to form sodium chloride. We use sodium chloride on our food, but we would not be able to use sodium as an element or chlorine as an element. But when combined in the form of a compound, will take on entirely new and different characteristics. Chemical bonds. The atoms and compounds are held together by various types of chemical bonds. Bond formation involves the electrons that surround each atomic nucleus. The tendency of elements to combine and form compounds depend on the number and arrangement of electrons in their outermost energy level. The main types of chemical bonds are ionic bonds and covalent bonds. An ionic bond is formed when one or more electrons are transferred from one atom to another. An atom that loses electrons becomes positively charged. An atom that gains electron has a negative charge. These positively and negatively charged atoms are known as ions. Ionic bonds form between sodium and chlorine to form sodium chloride, table salt, as you saw in the previous slide. Again, you will see the diagram at the top representing the formation of sodium chloride through ionic bonding. This diagram shows how ionic bonds form between sodium and chlorine to produce sodium chloride or table salt. It shows the transfer of electrons from a sodium atom to a chlorine atom. When sodium loses its one outer electron, it becomes a positively charged ion. Its second energy level, which has 8 electrons, is now a full outermost energy level. The transferred electron fills chlorine's outermost energy level, forming a negative ion. An ionic bond forms through the electrical forces between oppositely charged ions. A covalent bond is formed when electrons are shared by atoms. Covalent bonds form between hydrogen and oxygen to produce a water molecule. You will see in the diagram below where hydrogen and oxygen are sharing electrons again in the outer shell for the formation of the water molecule. Here's another example showing the formation of water through covalent bonding. Let's practice. Identify the type of bond shown in the cartoon below. Here you will find a cartoon with the caption, perhaps one of you gentlemen would mind telling me what is outside the window that you find so attractive. Look at the charges of the elements on the inside of the window versus the ones on the outside. Use that information to identify the type of bond. Is it an ionic bond? Is it a covalent bond? This is an ionic bond. An ionic bond is an attraction between two opposite charged atoms. The cartoon shows the positively charged atoms on the inside of the window are attracted to the negatively charged atoms on the outside of the window. Properties of water. A water molecule is made up of 3 atoms, 1 oxygen and 2 hydrogen atoms. Water is one of few compounds found in a liquid state over most of the surface of the earth. Water is polar. The charges are unevenly distributed. The oxygen end is negative and the hydrogen end is positive, as you see in the diagram above. Because water is a polar compound, it is able to form multiple hydrogen bonds, which account for many of water's special properties. The attraction between a hydrogen atom on one water molecule and the oxygen atom on another is known as a hydrogen bond. Hydrogen bonds are not as strong as covalent or ionic bonds, and they can form in other compounds as well. Additional properties of water. Water has a high heat capacity. High heat capacity is the amount of energy required to increase its temperature. Adhesion is an attraction between water molecules of different substances. Adhesion forms capillary action, which gives water the ability to climb structure, as you can see in the diagram. Cohesion causes water molecules to be drawn together. This results in surface tension. This surface tension allows insects and spiders to walk on water. Water is less dense as a solid. Ice acts as an insulator to allow the water below to remain as a liquid. Let's practice. Identify the property of water that best explains the following statements. Water forms raindrops as it flows through the air. Fish and other aquatic life are able to survive sub-zero temperatures. Water is able to ascend very tall trees. Many types of materials are able to be dissolved in water. Let's take a few moments to answer these questions. Here are our answers. Number 1, cohesion. Remember, cohesion is an attraction between molecules of the same substance. Number 2, low density of ice. Low density of ice allows it to float on large bodies of water. If ice sank, it will form on the bottom of a body of water as water is cooling. Ponds and lakes would freeze from the bottom up, trapping the fish and other organisms. Number 3, adhesion, an attraction between molecules of different substances. This attraction produces a capillary action that forces water up the trees. Number 4, polarity. The positive and negative ends of water allow it to dissolve many substances. Solutions. Water is the universal solvent. That means water will dissolve more substances than any other substance on earth. Again, that is because of its polarity. It is a polar molecule. A solution is a mixture of substances that is the same throughout. It is a homogeneous mixture, meaning the same. A solution is composed of 2 parts, solute and solvent. In a saltwater solution, table salt is the solute, the substance that is dissolved. Water is the solvent, the substance in which the solute is dissolved. You can see that shown in the diagram below, where sodium chloride or salt is added to water and it becomes a homogeneous solution. Acid and bases. Some compounds break into ions when they dissolve in water. An acid is any compound that forms hydrogen ions in solution. A base is a compound that produces hydroxide ions in a solution. The pH scale is a measurement system used to indicate the concentration of hydrogen ions in a solution. The pH scale ranges from 0 to 14. Solutions with a pH below 7 are called acidic because they have more hydrogen ions than hydroxide ions. The lower the pH, the greater the acidity. In other words, the stronger the acid. Solutions with a pH above 7 are called basic. They have more hydroxide ions than hydrogen ions. The higher the pH, the more basic the solution. So your stronger bases are at the top of the pH scale. And your stronger acids are at the bottom of the pH scale. The pH of the fluids within most cells in the human body must generally be kept between 6.5 and 7.5 in order to maintain homeostasis. Homeostasis is the balanced state that the body tries to maintain. If the pH is lower or higher, it would affect the chemical reactions that take place within the cells. One of the ways that organisms control pH is through dissolved compounds called buffers, which are weak acid or bases that can react with strong acids or bases to prevent sharp sudden changes in pH. Here's a diagram of a pH scale. As you can see, the acids are found below 7. 7 is considered neutral on the pH scale, and your bases are above 7. If you look at the arrows, you will see, as we stated earlier, your stronger acids will have lower pH numbers than your weaker acid, and your stronger bases will have higher pH numbers than your weaker bases. So here's our activity. Let's practice. Let's take a moment to look at the pH scale and answer these questions. Which is more basic, blood or ammonia? What is the pH of drain cleaner? Will a lemon have more hydrogen or hydroxide ions? What is the pH of a lemon? Is water an acid, a base, or neutral? So let's take a moment to use the scale to answer these questions. Here are your answers. Which is more basic, blood or ammonia? The correct answer is ammonia because it is on the basic end of the pH scale. What is the pH of drain cleaner? 14. It's a very strong base. Would a lemon have more hydrogen or hydroxide ions? It would have more hydrogen ions because that is one of the characteristics of an acid. What is the pH of a lemon? 2. Is water an acid, a base, or neutral? Water is neutral on the pH scale, or should I say pure water is neutral on the pH scale. Let's practice. John consumes large amounts of black coffee and tomato juice daily. Sometimes these fluids cause digestive discomforts, and he takes antacid to reduce the symptoms. Use your knowledge of acid, bases, and pH to explain why antacid reduces the symptoms. Your answer: coffee and tomatoes are acidic fluids. Antacids are bases. A base reacts with an acid to form a less acidic product. Antacids help neutralize digestive juices by changing its pH. Carbon compounds. Carbon can bond with many elements, including hydrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur, and nitrogen to form the molecules of life. Carbon can share its electrons with other atoms to form up to 4 covalent bonds. Carbon-carbon bonds can be single, double, or triple covalent bonds. Chains of carbon atoms can even close up on themselves to form rings, and you see examples of these down at the bottom of the slide. These are organic or compounds that contain carbon. Macromolecules. Many of the molecules in living cells are very large and known as macromolecules. Most molecules are formed by a process known as polymerization, through which large compounds are built by joining smaller ones together. The smaller units or monomers join together to form polymers. And these are your types of macromolecules. You will find your carbohydrates, your lipids, your proteins, and your nucleic acid. And you will see the arrows pointing to each type. Let's look at the characteristics of these macromolecules, starting with carbohydrate. Your type, again, that's carbohydrates. You have sugar, starches, and cellulose. Sometimes they're called monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. Your monosaccharides are your simple sugars, and your polysaccharides are your complex carbohydrates, such as starches. The structure contains carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen in a 1-to-1 ratio. Monomer, which is the simplest form of a macromolecule. In this case, For carbohydrates, it is glucose. Let's look at the function. Living things use carbohydrates as their main source of energy. Some plants and animals use carbohydrates for structural purposes. The second type of macromolecules would be your lipids. Lipids include fats, oils, and waxes. If you look at the structure, lipids are composed of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, but not in the same 1-to-1 ratio as carbohydrates. Your monomers for your lipids are fatty acids and glycerol. You look at the function of lipids. Lipids form parts of biological membrane. They store energy. They help insulate the body and cushion and protect organs. Proteins are the third type of macromolecules. Its structure includes carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. The monomer for a protein is an amino acid. There are 20 amino acids. Different combinations of the amino acids, like the letters of the alphabet, will form the different types of protein. Proteins control rate of reaction, regulate cell processes, form cellular structures, and fight diseases. Nucleic acids are the fourth type of macromolecules, and they would include DNA and RNA. Structure would include hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, and phosphorus. Nucleotides are monomers for nucleic acids. As you can see, the nucleotide consists of 3 parts: a nitrogen base, a phosphate group, and a sugar. Nucleic acids store and transmit genetic information. Let's practice. Use arrows to show how the boxes below are related to the information in the circles. Let's take a moment for you to do that. Okay, here are your answers. As you can see, your cell wall is a type of carbohydrate. Human hair, protein. Energy, carbohydrate, because we get our energy source from our carbs, our carbohydrates. Insulation, lipids. Brown eyes, DNA. Muscle building, protein. Enzymes are proteins that act as biological catalysts. Enzymes do not cause reactions to happen. They speed up chemical reactions to take place in cells. Enzymes act by lowering the activation energies, which has a dramatic effect on how quickly reactions are completed. Without enzymes, the reaction of the cell will proceed very slowly. Enzymes are never used up in the reaction. They can be used over and over again. Enzymes get their names from the substances they act on and the action of the enzyme. Let's look at the example, lipase. Lipase breaks down a lipid. Many of your enzymes end in ASE. Let's look at how enzymes work. Enzymes are very specific, generally catalyzing only one chemical reaction. The reactants of enzyme catalase reactions are known as substrates. The substrates bind to a site on the enzyme called the active site. The active site and the substances have complementary shapes. The fit is so precise that the active site and the substrates are often compared to a lock and key. As you can see in the diagram, you see where the active site is located, and you see that the substrate is shaped like the active site. Enzyme regulation. Temperature affects the action of enzymes. Enzyme produced by human cells generally works best at temperature close to 37 degrees Celsius, the normal temperature of the human body. pH also affects an enzyme. Enzymes work best at certain pH values. For example, the stomach enzyme pepsin, which begins protein digestion, works best under acidic conditions. Regulatory molecules. The activities of most enzymes are regulated by molecules that carry chemical signals within cells, switching enzymes on or off as needed. Let's practice. Label the structures on the following picture. Your choices: enzyme, active site, products, reactant, substrate. So let's take a moment to complete this activity. Here are your answers. Number 1, those are your substrate. 2 is your enzyme. 3 is your active site. If you notice, as I stated in a previous slide, your active sites and your substrate are complementary of each other. And 4 is the product. Let's review. The effect of pH on a certain enzyme is shown in the graph below. Let's look at the graph. At what pH would the enzyme be most affected? By looking at the graph, you look at the curve, the peak of the curve. Therefore, it's the most affected between 8 and 10 if you look at the peak of the curve in the diagram. So B is your correct choice. An enzyme and 4 different molecules are shown in the diagram below. Let's take a minute to look at the diagram. The enzyme most likely affect reactions involving A, molecule A only, B, molecule C only, C, molecules B and D only, and D, molecules A and C. Remember, I said in a previous slide that the substrate and the active site are complementary of each other. So B, looking at the shape of the molecules, B is the only choice that would make it complementary to the active site and the enzyme. Ice floats on a lake. This characteristic of water is responsible for A, suffocation of aquatic organisms, B, mixing a lake's thermal layers, C, preventing a lake from freezing solid, D, altering migration patterns of fish. If we think back to the properties of water with high heat capacity, that should tell you that the correct answer is C, preventing a lake from freezing solid. Proteins are formed from monomer subunits called, again, think back to your informational slides to choose the correct answer. Your choices are A, nucleic acid, B, fatty acid, C, nucleotides, and D, amino acid. The correct answer is D. We can eliminate A because nucleic acid is a type of macromolecule. Fatty acids are monomers of lipids. Nucleotide is the monomer for the nucleic acid, so the correct answer choice is D, amino acids. Which of the following macromolecules are a prominent part of animal tissues that function in insulation, helping animals conserve heat? Carbohydrates provide the body with energy, so we can eliminate A. Proteins help build structures in the body or in an organism, so we can eliminate C. Nucleic acids are responsible for the transmission of genes or traits, so we can eliminate D. So the correct answer choice is B.